on which we're gathered, the ancestral homeland of the Wabanaki people. Theirs is the original struggle of this land, and may all of us who are settlers of this place strive to always be in solidarity with their ongoing fight for justice and sovereignty. So many people come together in these halls, united under a vision of justice and human rights. My name is LaSala, and I'm a low-income student at the University of Southern Maine and a member of the Southern Maine Workers Center. We are an organization of low-wage workers organizing for our rights in the workplace. But we're also building a grassroots movement for the human right to health care, united under a vision of a state that exists to ensure all of our human rights are met. The Southern Maine Workers Center asked the organizers if we could speak today because we thought it was important to share that today our friends in Vermont are also gathered by the thousands outside of their state house in defense of their human rights.
Yay, Vermont!
At the Southern Maine Workers Center, we've been deeply inspired by what folks in Vermont are doing. In 2008, through wide-reaching and deep grassroots organizing, our friends and partners at the Vermont Workers Center won a historic victory in the passage of Act 48, putting Vermont on the path to implement the first truly universal healthcare system in the country. A system where everyone pays what they can and everyone without exception gets the care that they need. Governor Shumlin recently announced a decision not to uphold Act 48, which requires Vermont to provide health care as a public good to all residents by 2017. Governor Shumlin's move is a quintessential example of the power of money in politics. This is a man who ran his campaign on support of universal health care, riding on the coattails of one of the most powerful people's movements in recent Vermont history. Shumlin's 180-degree turn is a perfect reminder that getting the right politicians in power will never be enough. It is up to us to build our own power by getting organized, by building relationships, by being in solidarity with each other's struggles, by reaching beyond our comfort zones, by getting to know our neighbors, and by having real conversations about the values that matter most to us in life. The Vermont Workers Center has organized to push out the limits of what is politically possible and transform the way statewide organizing is done. Today we join Vermonters in calling on elected officials to honor their commitment to the people who refuse to wait any longer. We refuse to wait any longer for a world where everyone is cared for when they are sick, where everyone is warm and well-housed and well-fed, where we have work with dignity, a healthy environment, and communities without violence or prisons. While so many of us live with these issues every day, it's important to acknowledge that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by human rights violations on every front. Therefore, it is essential that we always look to their leadership, especially in this moment when Black leaders across the country are sounding the call for racial justice and leading us all towards a better world. I look forward to getting organized with you all to build that better world starting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Here she comes again. Are you ready? Yeah. Because every person in Maine deserves a living wage. Yeah. We are united for a common good. Because quality health care should be available to all, no question. We are united for a common good. Because workers pay for free trade with race-to-the-bottom wages. We are united for a common good. Because free trade agreements are costly instruments of corporate domination and power. We are united for a common good. Because trade agreements reduce environmental protections to the lowest common denominator. We are united for a common good. social outcomes.
We are united for common good.
We envision political decision-making free from the influence of corporate wealth because
we are united for common good.
I'll be back.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce 3 organizers with We the People Maine. Naomi Cohen, Beattie Parker, and Jan Carpenter.
One year ago at this rally, We the People Maine announced the beginning of its petition campaign for a constitutional amendment declaring that corporations are not people and money is not speech. We signed up our first volunteers here. Since then, we've had more than 400 volunteers helping us spread the word about this effort and to gather signatures from voters in every county in the state. We've been told by professionals that it is truly awesome that our all-volunteer grassroots group has collected more than 33,000 signatures. We applaud the success of the Clean Elections petition campaign and the rapid progress of the ranked choice voting petition campaign. These are excellent steps in getting back our democracy. But our democracy will not be won back without a reversal of the Supreme Court's decisions over many decades that have established corporations as people with constitutional rights. That's why we are continuing the We the People Maine campaign through this spring. What we need beyond signatures is a more widespread understanding of the reasons behind the call for corporate rights to be secondary to people's rights. Corporate power is at the root of the challenges most of the people here are working on, and if we can provide information and awareness about this, we will have increasingly numerous voices saying that corporations should not have the same rights as people. We will also be encouraging our supporters to speak with state legislators about 3 bills that have been submitted using different wording to make the request for an Article 5 constitutional amendment, and to lobby for language that best supports revoking corporate personhood.
I just want to add, we've had this cheerleading which adds in all the different elements that we fight corporate power in these different issues. Sorry. And I don't really need to go through them again, but I will. Corporate power is a force for climate change. The Keystone Pipeline, military spending, peace work, protecting town water, that's what you are all about. But you need the legal foundation. We need to work on getting rid of corporate personhood. The East-West corridor, job export, voting rights, election influence, local sovereignty, regulating toxic substances, that's where I've been for a long time, gun control, adequate regulation of Maine's waters, mountaintops, forests, GMO labeling, protection from pesticide exposure, protection from EMF exposure, universal health care, local food movement, and financial regulation, which is really big, and that's another place which is driving where we're going for growth, for economic growth. So we really need people to understand this legal foundation and work for it.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Naomi Cohen. I'm one of the attorneys. Phil Warden over there is the other attorney who wrote the We the People Maine proposed amendment. You've heard Beattie speak about all the problems that corporate money causes. I want to talk to you about an opportunity. Representative Ralph Chapman and Representative Dean Ricketson are 2 very brave members of our Maine legislature who have right now have submitted the We the People Maine amendment to the Maine legislature. In addition, is a marvelous opportunity. There also are 2 other wordings with similar goals. So I do not want this bill killed before it reaches the floor. Last year, it was killed before it reached the floor by the Democratic leadership. We can stop that from happening. If every single one of us picks up the phone when we leave this rally, when we get home and all through the week, and calls every legislature we know and tells them, make sure this bill, the We the People bill, makes it to the floor for a vote, we can change all of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan, Beatty, and Naomi. Now we have Heather Rehberg. Heather farms with her husband Phil at Quills End Farm in Penobscot. Homeschools her children, is secretary of the Halcyon Grange, working on collaboratively rebuilding agriculture infrastructure and cultural historical knowledge about food and farming. Heather also serves on the board of Food for Maine's Future and is the leader of Local Food Rules, which promotes a revolution in thinking about who should control our local food systems. Heather. This is just a reminder, please keep your conversations down in the back because it echoes right up here and makes too much noise pollution. After Heather, we have one more speaker, one more chant, and then we'll be singing together, so get your song sheets.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to talk to you today about food sovereignty, about farming, and about access to food from farms in this state. Chris told us at the beginning of this rally that water is life. Food is also life. Food is life, and we need a right to life. We need a right to our food, and we need a right to our water. The question is, how do we protect that right? Do we ask for it in these halls, or do we go to our communities? 4 years ago, my town passed the Local Food and Community Self-Governance Ordinance. The regulatory climate had been captured by food monopolies and corporations. It was inserting itself into the rules even on our main farms. The climate around selling milk and meat directly to neighbors in my own community was shifting, becoming less certain and less tenable. So we came here to Augusta. We were told to rally our people, to come to the halls of the committees, to speak truth to power, to warn of unintended consequences, to appeal to a committee and regulators to make scale-appropriate, safe regulations for our community. But we were told that federal, financial, and legal barriers to scalable regulation, that the Department of Agriculture's hands were tied, and that the Legislative Committee of Oversight couldn't act on behalf of the people. So we went home. We went back to our towns and we started asking questions. Both farmers and eaters in our communities got together and we asked the questions, who is making these decisions? Who's deciding what we eat? Who decides if we have access to the foods that we choose? Who decides if we have access to food that sustains our health and our environment, our economies? Just who or what was making these decisions? And even more importantly, who has the right to decide? The answers to those questions led us down a long path that brings me here to you today. But I didn't come to speak truth to power. I came to find all of you, to meet you, and to share our experiences with you, to encourage you to use your power. I've come to share with you some of the dusty tools of democracy that we rediscovered and used to protect our traditional ways of exchanging food, our access to food raised from farms, and our right to community self-governance. These tools can be used by all of us to protect our water, our air, our soils, our food, our farms, anything and everything that impacts our health, our safety, and our welfare. You may wonder what food sovereignty actually means. Food sovereignty puts those who eat and those who grow food at the heart